Hello, everybody. Today, I'm joined once again by Leo from Para Bellum Wargames, and we're going to be talking about updating the Path of Conquest milestones for the Nords for the new 1.5 version of the game. So, Leo, it's great to have you back on the channel.
Thank you. Thank you. And today, going through all these different factions, coming into the Nords, I think the Nords have even though they have this new faction special rule, unlike other factions, they only have one, essentially, unlike the others that they could pick from. But I think that we nailed this update that allowed the Nords to really double down on their strengths. And this is something that really, really builds up on their very aggressive playstyle. I'm very excited for.
Okay. Well, in that case, do you want to tell us a bit about the rule then that you've added to the Nords?
So, true to the lore, the name of the new rule is called Blood of the Einherjar. Right? The Einherjar is this I want to say faction. This is a little foreshadowing, right? But right now we haven't really developed and talked about, but it is very deeply, heavily entrenched in the lore and the story of the Nords. And I'm not going to say a lot more because there's some great stuff that is coming down the line about that. So regarding the rules, so essentially, each and every Nords regiment gains some bonus when they take casualties, right? So, for example, if a regiment is taking has any wounded stance, or is missing any stance as a result of casualties, then that regiment gains the Fury 1 draw event. Now, keep in mind that with the recent changes to how impact attacks work, right? Raiders, for example, they have throwing weapons, giving them impact attacks. Fury now adds attacks to impact attacks as well. So now you get, with every tiny little bit of fury and things like that, now, impact becomes a lot more powerful. So it's good to think about, how it synergizes with the rest of the rules.
Sure.
Then if a regiment in your army has lost half or more of its stance, then that regiment gains the flurry special rule as well.
Okay.
And if the regiment already has Fury 1 or the Flurry special rule and gains any special rule from Blood of the Einherjar, it gains Fury +1. So let me break it down a little bit here. If you are missing a stand, you get Fury 1. If half of your regiment is destroyed, then you essentially get either Flurry, which is great given that you can have it on Huskarls, right? Or you can have it on Ogre or Trolls. Just
sure.
Or you can get Flurry +1. Sorry, Fury +1. So think about that. Think about charging raiders, right? Just the 3 stands of raiders that have left there with Fury 2 impacting with essentially 4 attacks each on the front rank and about 3 attacks each on the rear ranks if there's any left, right? How many attacks that is. And on top of that, you get to actually clash as well. It's just as the game goes on, each regiment becomes more powerful to be able to withstand, the attacks from medium and heavy regiments that are coming in.
Yeah. It's no longer a case of whittling down your opponent to have a softer target to deal with in the later game, because if your opponent starts whittling your units down, then they're just going to either remain at their combat effectiveness or actually increase.
That's right.
So, yeah, it becomes an interesting challenge where your opponent has to deal with.
It was very common, for example, that when you were playing against Nord players, at the very beginning when you had your first raiders and you had some stalkers and you have quite a few things. And I think especially raiders is that if you did significant damage to these regiments, then they could be a non-factor for when the medium and heavy regiments came. But now, essentially, you have to commit your power, right, into deleting these regiments. Otherwise, you're not really gaining much by doing just damage here and damage there. You have to make sure that they're dead, because otherwise they're going to come back and they're going to go back quite strong, right? And this necessity for your opponent to put a lot more hurt into one regiment means that it kind of saves a little bit the rest from it protects a little bit the rest of the regiments as well. And I think this is a very soft redistribution of how much power you have to put on each regiment, but I think it makes quite a bit of a difference for the play style of the Nords.
Oh yeah, it massively changes. If people looking at regiments consisting of maybe the minimum 3 stands or whatever it was, and all of a sudden they're going, well, I can't just leave one stand roaming and work on the principle they're not going to be able to actually hurt me.
And yet they can.
Yeah, they're not just going to be cherry picking their fights. Yeah. It is a case of having to go and deal with one regiment at a time and deal with it completely and effectively. Otherwise, they're just leaving themselves open to a world of pain and a flank later on. Because another thing is, when those stands are reduced in size to a single stand, they become much more maneuverable as well.
That's right.
And being able to get in behind lines or getting through terrain becomes much easier for single stands than it is for large regiments. And that tactical maneuver can be massive in a game as well. So it's not just the fact that they're still going to be fighting very potently, but the positions where they're going to be launching their attacks from,
that's right,
can become very, very different as well. So I can see why they only needed one new rule for them. You wouldn't really need to change that up too much.
Yeah, it's for example, a single stand of raiders under these rules, just if it slips through the gaps, you're not going to get hurt on your mainstay, on your, let's say, Thanes or on your men-at-arms so much. But it's, for example, it has happened that a single stand of raiders slipped through the cracks and did some serious damage on some marksman clones. And if you think about the points disparity there and about how much, suddenly not having that fire base it hurts quite a bit. And it happened because one stand of raiders was neglected essentially, and it went through the cracks and it did the damage. So
people are going to have to commit their forces en masse to make sure they're not going to suffer later on for it.
That's right. And so supremacy abilities remain quite the same, because we felt that with the Nords, we were very close to the way that we intended them to play. The Blooded, Call of the Hunt. You have every regiment in the warband gains the flank special rule. That is, you don't roll for reinforcements. You choose when they're coming in. Insane, absolutely great rule, especially for ensuring that early strike. Jarl with surprise attack. You are modifying the reinforcement roll value of your opponents, right? So you're making it harder for your opponents to bring their regiments onto the game. You have the King, the Conjungear, that can gain additional items, right? That can actually use more. And all friendly regiments, when they perform a charge action, they also gain Terrifying 1 until the beginning of their next activation.
Okay.
So very useful, especially when you're charging, when you gain these extra rules. And on top of that, you also have Terrifying 1. So that is a great addition there. The Shaman has the Call of the Storm, which essentially you choose a friendly regiment per round currently not on the table and gains the Vanguard special rule, right? So you can come in deeper and you do essentially 3 moves. And finally, we have the Volva, so the Gift of the Einherjar, that gives all regiments in the army, except for all stands in the army, except for character stands, of course, the +1 evasion. So this can help a lot, especially if you see some changes that happen with the army sentries. So pretty standard things for Nords. The Blood of the Einherjar was the new special rule. It doubled down on what the Nords were actually doing. But what we wanted to make sure is that we wanted to enrich a little bit their gameplay through some new releases. So we have the Fenrir Beastpack, right? light wolves. They're feral. They don't really mess with your reinforcement line, but they're definitely a great addition. High mobility regiment to tackle enemy range units. Right. Usually, one of the problems that you face as a Nords player is your opponent's range capacity and how much hurt they could put into your raiders before they got there. Now it is a little bit diminished because the more you take casualties, the stronger you're going to end up getting there. But you can also make sure that your regiments get there unharmed without with some thinner. Then the mountain Jotnar went up to 16 wounds, right, with and 12 attacks. So this is a massive boost for the Mountain Jotnar. Very, very competitive for its points. Very, very strong and good for everything that it brings onto the table. Mm-hmm. But I think really the cake is all eaten by the Ice Jotnar. Now, before the Ice Jotnar was in a little bit of a precarious position, it would either cast or move or charge, right? And spell casting on a monster was a quite unique feature, but we felt that it wasn't represented enough because you couldn't really mix it up with your charge and attacks. So now it was updated that it can actually cast a spell casting action for free, as well as attack and do all of its gnarly damage on the opponent.
I think that's an important one for me looking at the list, because when you have something that can deal out as much damage as the Ice Jotnar, and then you get in a position where potentially you have to weigh up whether or not you wanted to cast or to just go in and start attacking. That turn where you're casting means you're kind of missing out. Or if you're just pushing them into combat and not casting, then the points for the spells that he has access to are kind of wasted. So having it as a free action really makes the cost in your list for bringing the Ice Jotnar much more cost effective, and you're no longer having that either or moment. Instead, you can just slap some ice armor on and go smashing to your heart's content.
Yeah, and I think the way I like the Ice Jotnar, I see it as this piece on the table that allows you to play with tempo, right? You keep pushing your advantage. So, for example, you have the Ice Jotnar, you use Encase on a enemy regiment. That means you have their march value essentially, which means that it cripples your opponent's ability to get in contact, to get a charge there, right? So you make sure that there is this deadly enemy regiment that cannot charge this round, and so Encase, charge, attack someone else, and then the rest of your army will make sure that they're going to punish that enemy regiment that couldn't charge. So I like how now we keep doubling down on that. Always on that tactic of always putting your opponent on the back foot. And I really like that. It's really aggressive, and it has that feel to it throughout all stages of the game, where before that, you felt maybe some Nord players would feel that they wouldn't have as many tools during the late game.
Like you say, it's the choices. It's being able to decide the best way to use them at that particular time, and having the options open to you to hamper your opponent, or to really push in and try and stymie their main line from coming forward is always good.
And this, for me, these updates for all factions just, it really helps us bring this image, that this vision that we had for them, for the all factions, to bring them to life. We faction special rules were always very important for us. We always wanted to make sure that each army really plays differently. Each army is its own. It's a living, breathing entity in the world of conquest, and it had to be able to represent its unique traits onto the battlefield. I'm just absolutely happy with the balance that was struck between, uniqueness, aesthetic, and gameplay balance. And I'm so happy to see that, especially for factions that have multiple choices to go for. I really see strong debates between competitive players about which one to use. And that's, for me, that's the greatest compliment, right? Yeah. To be able to really not know which faction special rule is the real winner. And I absolutely appreciate that.
Yeah, I think that it comes down to a lot about how the game has developed. The fact that the Nords, who were before the Wadrun, the most recent addition to Conquest, had the least amount to update into 1.5 because they were on the cusp. Yes, obviously some of the other factions we've talked in the other videos, they've had a bit more put into them because those armies, I wouldn't say we're lagging behind, but with the advent of the Wadrun and the Nords, they certainly needed more to bring them to a balance or a more cohesive list, whereas the Nords just needed a few little tweaks, one racial special ability, and away they go. And I like the idea behind the supremacy abilities. There's a lot about the maneuver again, and in a game of rank and file, maneuver is key, I feel. Even down to something as simple as the Jarl's ability to force the -1 onto other people's reinforcements. I love that, because if somebody has taken, we talked about in like the spires, if they've taken these abilities to give them a benefit to reinforcements, and all of a sudden a Jarl comes along and negates that, that's aggravating. And if they haven't taken those benefits to the reinforcements and a Jarl comes along and slaps a -1 on everything that was standard, then that's even worse. So yeah, the maneuver, the speed of the forces there, and the choices that exist within both the list itself and the supremacy abilities just really add to that. It gives you, like you said, a lot of options in the toolbox of exactly how you want to play the Nords and what you can use to solve your particular problems on the battlefield. Well, folks, that is our update for the Nords. If you're looking to find out more information, you can go to parabellum.com. You'll be able to see the 1.5 rulebook if you haven't already. We will include the PDF updated below. And of course, there is the army builder that includes all of the new abilities and streamlined keywords and their explanations in there. So it should make building your force for the last argument, Kings, even easier. Until next time, bye-bye.
Go ahead and check out our other content on screen now. And while you're at it, why not hit subscribe and remember to ding our dong. Go on, you know you want to click it. Go on.